Welcome to Diving Deep into Government Efficiency. Okay, so it looks like the whole DOGE concept, that Trump's putting together, is gaining traction, or at least inspiration. I saw Missouri and Wisconsin are thinking about implementing their own versions. What do you guys make of it?
Yeah, I saw that too. It's interesting, right? I mean, on the one hand, I get it. Government is huge, probably has a lot of waste, right? But on the other hand, it feels like they're just kind of jumping on the bandwagon. Like, oh, Elon's doing it. It must be good. But what's it actually going to mean for regular folks? Like, am I going to see any actual difference in my taxes or the services I get?
I think it's a terrible idea and a waste of government time. All these DOGE initiatives are just distractions. Our current system, while not perfect, is the best in the world, and instead of trying to mirror some billionaires' ideas, we should be working on incremental improvements. It's not about business principles, it's about serving the public good, which is a totally different kind of customer, and efficiency is not the only thing that matters. It's irresponsible to think we should be run like some startup.
But isn't that the whole point, though? We're not talking about a startup, we are talking about a system that has become bloated and inefficient. And yes, some of it is because of the public good angle, but some of it is just, well, bad management. I think that's what this DOGE thing is trying to tackle, right? And I agree with Rick Scott. Business principles, when applied correctly, are actually incredibly effective in creating streamlined, efficient, high-quality services, just in a different space. Think about it in hospitals, for example, that can benefit immensely. And these committees in Missouri and Wisconsin, they're not automatically bad just because they are inspired by this thing. If they genuinely look at how money is being spent and eliminate the waste, then why not?
Okay, but how do you decide what's waste? I mean, one person's waste is another person's job or service, right? We hear about cutting red tape, sure, who doesn't hate red tape? But then, when those regulations disappear and some huge company starts polluting a river, then everyone's like, where was the regulation? It's not that easy. And these guys, Musk, Ramaswamy, and even Trump, they've never run anything that's as large, complex, and has the same social responsibilities as the government. Look, I agree that government can be improved, but we can't just apply some business principles without considering the impact on ordinary people.
Exactly, it's not as simple as cutting costs. You can't just streamline a hospital like you would a factory. We need layers of processes in place, checks and balances that are slow, expensive, but that are there for a reason. Look at the healthcare articles, for example. There is some progress in making costs more transparent, right? That's a good thing, but it's a slow and complicated process. And it is not some simple solution of a DOGE committee coming in and fixing it in a couple of weeks. I worry that they will just cut the things that are easiest and have a disproportionate effect on marginalized communities.
But the article also mentions that employers are using transparency data, right? So that's a good thing. That's using business principles to lower costs. And it's not like people are cutting services to poor people. That's what you seem to be implying. But it's also about streamlining how things are done, not cutting corners. Think about the IT systems for the federal government. According to Musk, they are so outdated that they have trouble verifying payments and eliminating fraud. That's also a form of waste, and it is directly impacting taxpayers, so it's not about cutting programs. It's about modernizing the systems, making it cheaper for the government to operate.
Okay, yeah, the IT thing, that makes sense. I agree. That needs an update. But I also remember the rollout of some other government websites and systems, right? That's usually a mess. So it's easy to say just modernize, but then we spend billions on a program that doesn't actually work. I'm sure it would cost a lot of money to upgrade the entire federal system. Who pays for that? Plus, I'm still not convinced that they won't just start cutting funding for programs that help real people. They'll say, oh, this is inefficient. And then suddenly, people will lose their assistance. Also, the healthcare transparency, while good in theory, it also means that hospitals now see what other hospitals are charging, and then they adjust their own prices. Is it better or worse after all? How do we prevent them from just colluding? I mean, it's still a business, right?
And that's my whole point, right? We need strong regulations and oversight, not just some arbitrary streamlining, and those regulations cost money. And I find it funny that some of you think that business principles are somehow the answer to everything. Businesses don't always have the best interests of the public at heart. The goal of a business is to make profit, and the goal of the government is to serve its people. Those are completely different incentives, and that's the reason why it's dangerous to apply private sector strategies to government service. And I mean, it's literally impossible to apply these strategies. If the goal is to make profit, then what does the government sell? Nothing. If we are focusing on the business principles as the main priority, then what is the value of the government? Why do we need it?
But it's not about turning the government into a for-profit business. That's a complete mischaracterization of what people like Trump and Musk are talking about. It's about applying the same kind of logic, analytical tools that make businesses successful in a very, very simplified way to the government sector. Efficiency is not about squeezing every penny. It's about spending the taxpayers' money wisely. For instance, look at what Rick Scott did in Florida. He mentioned getting rid of 20% of the regulations, streamlined permitting, and yet created 1.7 million jobs. That's efficiency. That's removing useless red tape without hurting public good. And these DOGE initiatives, they're not an end in themselves. They're a means to an end, which is the benefit of the people through a better government. And on the website upgrades, I agree that the government programs and websites have been a mess. But, and this is a big but, that does not mean it will always be like that. Why don't we try something different for a change? The status quo is clearly not working.
Okay, but that's a pretty broad stroke, you know? Getting rid of 20% of the regulations sounds great, but what exactly were those regulations? Maybe some of them were there for a good reason, right? And on the jobs creation, yes, it's important, but that could be for a variety of reasons. It's important, but that could be for a variety of reasons, like the economy booming or any variety of factors. It's not always that simple. I don't know. I guess I am just nervous that this business principles approach will just be a cover for cutting essential programs. And on the websites, I mean, we are spending so much money as it is. Where are they going to find more? I feel like we will end up spending even more money in the long run and end up with a system that is still full of problems. And just because something is different does not make it good.
See, I agree with that. Just because it is different does not make it good. This whole DOGE thing feels like we are just experimenting on people's lives. It's like, let's try this random thing and see if it works. And this obsession with Musk is frankly insane. People seem to think that because he built a successful car company, he knows everything about government. And it isn't always about money. I mean, the goal should be a functioning system, not a cheap one. The article mentions, for example, that they need to upgrade their data strategies. And sure, I agree that the current data infrastructure is outdated, but this is not done overnight. And this is something that the government is already doing, slowly but surely. But these people act like they are the first ones to ever consider the idea of modernization.
Yes, but they are doing it now because the system needs a shock, right? It's not about Musk being a magical cure, but he is demonstrating what can be achieved through innovative thinking, and the government, frankly, needs to get rid of all the inertia and bureaucracy. And about Rick Scott's Florida policies, I am not saying that it was perfect, but it is an example of what can be done when you actively look at what you can stop doing, not just endlessly adding to the mix. I think we have gotten used to the idea of government bloat that we have forgotten there is actually another way to operate. And the data systems for the government, that's a huge issue. They don't even have good data to even figure out where to cut and what is working. How can you manage something without data? It's like flying blind. And this DOGE committee, well, it's at least attempting to identify these issues.
Okay, I get that the government needs better data management. That's actually quite obvious. But I'm still worried about the cut first, ask questions later approach. I mean, look at what's going on in Wisconsin with the universities, right? They're basically saying you guys need to show us that you are cutting DEI and other things that they don't like, and then we will talk about funding. It feels very ideological, right? Not really about efficiency at all. And on data, yes, it's important, but the article also says that the government has been working on data strategies for a while now. It is not a new concept. So it's not like we were completely ignoring it before Musk came along. And this data transparency, while good, it seems to only be helping employers, not necessarily the consumer like us.
Exactly. And the idea that Musk is going to come and do what no one else has been able to do just because he has business acumen is honestly ludicrous. The problems of government are far more complex than creating a faster car or a satellite. The rules are different. And the article also mentions that these government efficiency groups are essentially advisory councils. They have no legal authority to actually do anything. They are just people providing advice. And the thing is, the government actually gets lots of expert advice already. But the government and the bureaucracy exist for a reason, to make sure that everything goes through a proper process, not to take shortcuts or get something done faster at the cost of transparency and fairness. I think we're in danger of trading stability for a very superficial definition of efficiency.
Well, that's true about the advisory part. But maybe they can recommend changes, and it is up to other parts of the government to actually make those changes. It is very similar to a consultant, you know? I think it's good that it's pushing for a conversation about efficiency. And yes, it's a complex issue. But that does not mean we should accept inefficiencies because they are complex. And on the universities in Wisconsin, I agree that it's probably a bit too ideological. I'm not saying that we should impose ideological things, but in general, we need to cut the red tape, and that also involves funding useless programs. It's not about cutting programs that help people. It's about stopping the government from wasting money. And that's the focus of this whole DOGE initiative. I do think it's exciting. Think about a government where things work, are cheap and effective. It could change the world.
Okay, I'll admit the idea of government that actually works and does what it's supposed to. That's a nice idea. But I'm still really skeptical that these DOGE committees are going to actually achieve anything meaningful, or rather, if they will achieve anything, who's going to benefit? And I don't see them cutting red tape without impacting services. Plus, all of these ideas of modernizing IT systems and transparency, all of that is very expensive. How do they expect to save money if they have to spend more money to implement the changes in the first place? I mean, there is always an initial cost involved. And I keep going back to the healthcare stuff. Yes, transparency is good, but it needs to actually help patients, not just employers.
And exactly all of this initial costs, those are paid by taxpayers. And if you implement a system that fails or is too expensive, who pays for that? We do. This whole thing is being pitched as a way to save money, but it is probably going to cost us even more in the short and midterm. And look at the Wisconsin speaker. He's admitting that he will start cutting funds to the universities if they don't implement some ideological changes. That doesn't seem like a very good start, right? And it's a slippery slope. Today, they cut one program they don't like. Tomorrow, they'll start targeting programs that actually help vulnerable communities. I just don't trust this idea. I don't think that these people are thinking about all consequences of their ideas.
Okay, but you are just focusing on the negatives here. Yes, there will be an initial cost to fix the current problems, but the goal is to create long-term savings. It is like investing in a new machine that will save you costs in the long run. But you need to pay for it first. That's basic economics, right? I am sure that if these committees actually work, the initial cost will pay itself off. And these are just ideas. It doesn't mean that they are automatically bad. It's a starting point to make some changes that are necessary. And the problem with the ideological thing in Wisconsin, while it's wrong, is not necessarily a byproduct of the DOGE approach. Any politician can and will make those decisions regardless of efficiency committees, so it's like a red herring. And you are right, I agree. If the goal is to make things cheaper and it makes it worse, then obviously it fails. But why are you automatically assuming that it will fail? Let's give them a chance and see what they come up with, right?
Yeah, I'm not against improving government. And I do agree that we need to take a look at IT and probably make the systems work better. But I still worry that this is all going to be a waste of time and money. And maybe we end up with a government that is more efficient but less responsive to the needs of ordinary people. I guess we need to wait and see. I am not holding my breath, but who knows, maybe they will surprise me.
I highly doubt it, but yeah, we'll see. I remain extremely skeptical. I just don't think that these people understand the complexities of government. And I don't see any data that will prove me wrong on the long term. And the short term will definitely be worse, that's for sure.
Well, that's where the fun begins, I guess. The future will tell. It will be fascinating to see what comes out of all of this. I have high hopes. Anyway, we're out of time, so thanks for joining us on Diving Deep into Government Efficiency. Until next time.